actually rotate this plane. So we're looking for the lowest point, which is somewhere there. So the way we do it is, first we define a linear space between, so let me just plot it again so we have it. We use the linspace command to define kind of our range for x and y. So basically our bounds for x are going to be -2 and 0, and our bounds for y are going to be 0 and 3. So if we look here, and remember that x1 and x2 are our x and y, right? So x1 is the x, it ranges from -2 to 0, and x2 is our y value, so it ranges from 0 to 3. And those are the bounds which I set here. But the linspace command, it basically just generates numbers on this range, right? Between 0 and -2, or between 0 and 3. So it will generate these numbers, but what I need is actually need numbers. I need like a grid of numbers. So for example, here we see a grid, right? So grid means that there's a bunch of points like this. Because I want to evaluate this function at every one of these xy points. So for example, if I want to evaluate the height at -1.5 and 2.5, so that would be this point here, right? And I want to know the height at each one of these locations. So this is my grid. So MATLAB has a command called mesh grid. So you pass it these vectors, which kind of, what I drew here, they're the lines that define your range, and it will turn them into a 2D grid like this. So once you have the x and y gridded, you can pass them into your actual equation of the function that this plane, this 3D plane, and you calculate the z. So this z is going to be the height at each one of these points on the grid. So it's going to be like a 2D matrix which contains height values for every one of these gridded points that I drew in red. Right, so there's and the spacing, like how fine the grid is, you control it here with this number 40, right? Because that controls the spacing between your linspace points. So if you want the grid finer, you can add more intervals, or you can make it coarse and you use less intervals. And then once you have this three-dimensional function z, what this does is basically makes the plots. I think we studied the subplots, right? So the subplots, they make kind of two plots in the same figure. So this is subplot 1 and subplot 2. And they make two different plots. One will be a contour plot, the second one will be a surface C, which I think stands for colored surface. So those are the two plots that I showed you in my figure, right? I have a contour plot. So the contour plot takes in the x, y, and the z values. And same thing here, except I just make different plots. This one is your 2D plot, and this one is your 3D plot. This is just labels and titles. Here, what I'm doing is I'm finding the min and the max using MATLAB commands. And you can also use this. So fmin search, you define your equation as an anonymous function. So here you're defining an anonymous function with two different independent variables, x1 and x2. And then you simply feed that anonymous function f into your fmin search command here, and you give it the search bounds of -0.5 and +0.5, and it will spit out the minimum value and the height corresponding to that minimum, the location of the minimum value and the height of the minimum height at that location. So this code I can put on Moodle. It's really not expected that you know this multidimensional optimization. It's just showing you that what you can do with MATLAB. And so this was example 7.4 in the book, and it uses the fmin search function, which I just explained. So it says the function must be written in terms of a single variable where different dimensions are represented by different indices of that variable. And you will see that in my MATLAB, I only have one variable x, but then I give it like different indices, x1 and x2, x1 and x2, because MATLAB prefers this format. I think this just shows you an example. So they have a function which is a function of x and y, and they rewrite it in terms of x1 and x2. And once you rewrote it, you can define an anonymous function, which then you can feed to the fmin search command. And then here, these are your bounds of your search, or they're like initial guesses. Yeah, I guess they're initial guesses, they're not bounds, because the minimum value is at 0.75. Okay, so any questions about this? Yeah.
Can you go back to the subplot?
Subplot, yeah.
What's the command?
It's probably easier just to Google it. So for
What was confused about the numbers inside the bracket?
yeah, so let me explain that. So basically the first two numbers are 2, 1, right? So what this is saying is that I will have two, it's like a matrix of figures. And this is like the number of rows, and this is the number of columns. So if I swap these, if I had 1, 2 instead of 2, 1, then like this graph would be here. They would be in a row instead of in a column. Let me I can just copy this to MATLAB so I can show you. So this is the figure, and if I switch the two numbers, if I do it 1, 2 instead, you see they're on a single row instead of a single column. So let me undo this, and they go back to a column instead of a row. And then the last number, the third number, that's like the order of the figure. So for example, this is figure 1 and this is figure 2, right? So if I want to like place them in a different order, I can say that this is 1 and this is 2, so this graph, this graph is going to go up and this one is going to go down. So the first two numbers are like the shape of the figure matrix, and the second number is the address in that matrix. So for example here, you see this one is a 2 by 2. So you have 2 columns and 2 rows. And there are a total of 4 addresses. So it's probably going to be something like 1, 2, 3, 4, or it could also be 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not exactly sure which one it is. Which case it is, you have to check. But that's what the last number tells you.
And one row is like the y value, and the second row would be the x value, something like that.
Y values of what?
Because you said that what the first number is the number of rows.
The number, so this is like a matrix of figures, right? So the first number, the first number is the number of rows, right? So if you consider this to be a matrix, this would be row 1 and this would be row 2, and this is column 1 and column 2. And then the position is going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4. So you're giving it the shape of the figure matrix and then the position of each graph inside of that matrix. So it looks like here well, this is complicated, so let's not discuss this. Alright, any other questions? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll do our lab.